might I also say, heavenly. I just take my one chance to say it. After you've read that terrible book, you're certainly not going to be coming back to the shop.
For almost 15 years, Hollywood convinced us that rom-coms were dead. But were they really? That what we really wanted were superhero films, darker stories, and blockbuster franchises. But sitting here in 2026, something strange has happened. Love is back. Something I never thought I'd say. With the likes of voicemails for Isabelle, People We Meet on Vacation, and You Meet and Tuscany, the rom-com has quietly made one of Hollywood's biggest comebacks. When you think of rom-coms, it's likely you think back to the late 90s, early 2000s, arguably the golden era of the genre, with the likes of Love Actually, Bridget Jones, Notting Hill, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, all of those gracing our screens. So what happened? We seemed to enter an era of franchise cinema. The shift towards Marvel and the big blockbusters guaranteed to bring in returns. We entered an era of grittier storytelling, with rom-coms feeling more surface level, more predictable. But that isn't to say we lost an appetite for them. Studios instead began prioritizing franchises and established IP because they were a safer financial bet. So instead we entered an era of superheroes and character-driven stories that would deliver big returns. Due to this, rom-coms were one of the biggest casualties. That isn't to say it was a bad move, not in the slightest. However, at times it felt like stories focused on emotional connection and love were kind of looked down upon. But where did it all go wrong initially? Aside from the rise in big budget box office hits and the Marvel empire, it seemed Netflix inadvertently aided in harming the genre. Rom-coms, in a sense, became disposable. Yes, Netflix was filled to the brim with rom-coms, but ultimately they became forgettable. Almost everyone can quote a rom-com they grew up on. I'm just a girl standing in front of a boy. We all know the line. Yet Netflix rom-coms from a few years ago are mostly watched and forgotten. Most just disappear into the algorithm. Sitting here in 2026 though, it feels as though we are back to craving connection. But the shift didn't entirely happen this year, no. The pandemic was a major catalyst, as you might expect. Confined in our homes, human connection lost, and what we were so desperately seeking was love and comfort. Rewatching shows and movies that made us feel a semblance of normality. A lot of the time that ended up being rom-coms. I also like to describe this as something called the Marvel exhaustion. For years we were watching superheroes, apocalypse movies, dark mysteries, and prestige television. But over time, escapism even became exhausting. Marvel became oversaturated and television became too heavy. What we didn't realize we were seeking was comfort, optimism, human stories. This is the exact reason we saw a rise in cozy games and we began rewatching sitcoms. I mean, I don't know what my excuse is today because I must be going through some kind of burnout if I just binged all of Once Upon a Time. That gave me hope and comfort and human connection. Ultimately, people just wanted stories that made them happy, and there is nothing wrong with that. A rise in the need for the return of rom-coms is also driven heavily by Gen Z and social media. Gen Z have recently discovered, which terrifies me, 27 Dresses, Pride and Prejudice, and The Proposal, meaning clips were all over TikTok, resulting in millennials like myself revisiting those films we grew up on. I think that was what prompted studios to realize that they were missing out on something huge, that people were in fact missing a genre that some deemed shallow. I mean, the amount of times I've seen Darcy's hand flex from Pride and Prejudice on my TikTok For You page is quite concerning, but it of course has made me want to revisit the film, or even Heath Ledger singing in 10 Things I Hate About You. Ultimately, TikTok is successful in its task to remind me of how great these films are. It is essentially free advertising for an entire genre. Chemistry is also overlooked in all of this. One thing a lot of viewers have been complaining about in recent years, particularly me. It could just be me, so when I speak for everyone, I speak for myself. What we complain about is the lack of chemistry in cinema. Then films like Materialists, Voicemails for Isabelle, and People We Meet on Vacation, and even Off Campus, which, great. Great. Suddenly reminded us all what chemistry looks like. It wasn't just love we were missing, it was tension and desire. We had become accustomed to spectacle. We almost forgot how entertaining it is to watch two people just enjoy being around each other, to watch their love story develop. It is worth noting though that the genre never completely disappeared. It was just inside films and shows such as The Bear, One Day, Bridgerton, once again proving that audiences still loved romance, but just packaged slightly differently. It showed that we still desperately craved intimacy, but the romance just wasn't being marketed as the main event anymore. Now, that's not to say that rom-coms that are gracing our screens now are the ones that we are familiar with from our past. They have evolved. They have deepened the romance. Falling in love is no longer the finish line. Modern rom-coms are now focused on grief, anxiety, loneliness, and emotional baggage. It's not that love has become less important, it's simply no longer enough on its own, because ultimately, it doesn't feel real. Voicemails for Isabelle is a prime example of this, starring Zoe Deutsch and Nick Robinson. The film follows Jill, who is attempting to cope with the loss of her sister by leaving voicemails on her old phone, detailing her life in San Francisco. That is until her sister's number is reassigned and a real estate agent, Wes, begins receiving the voicemails. It is a love story, yes, but it is ultimately a film about raw grief, despite at times feeling a little stalker-esque, I must say. But Nick Robinson sprinting through the rain to find Jill was enough for me. I loved it. The Idea of You is another perfect example of how modern rom-coms have matured. The film follows a 40-year-old single mother who falls for the lead singer of a band who is quite a bit younger than her. It is also worth noting that this film was inspired by a Harry Styles fanfic, so take that as you will when watching the film, if you haven't watched it. It came out a while ago. The premise of the film could have been played out like wish fulfillment. Instead, the film spends more time exploring judgment, insecurity, and sacrifices that come along with choosing happiness. It is a story less about finding the one, more about allowing yourself to be loved in the first place. And also, who doesn't love Anne Hathaway? I love her so much. The guy, hit or miss. He was fine. As I stated before, cinema was in desperate need of variety over the last few years. With Marvel multiverse burnout and sequels being more prominent than ever, rom-coms fill an emotional gap, and at times, all we want is to leave the cinema smiling. Perhaps this resurgence also says something about us. Dating has become more digital, relationships more complicated, and genuine connection hard to come by. Maybe that is exactly why stories about two people finding one another feels more comfortable than ever right now. Ultimately, rom-coms never completely disappeared. They evolved, while audiences did the same. After years of superheroes and cynical storytelling, people aren't asking for bigger spectacles. We simply just want to feel something, which is exactly what I say to myself every single day. I just want to feel something. Perhaps Hollywood has finally realized that what we want is happiness, escapism, and hope. And at the end of the day, audiences will always show up for a great love story. Let me know what your favourite rom-com from this year is, and also what your favourite rom-com in general is. I actually don't even know what mine is. Notting Hill's up there. Love Actually's up there. The Holiday's up there. Bridget Jones. You know what? It might be quite a shock to people who have followed me on YouTube for a number of years. I am a sucker for a rom-com. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.